In March 1945, as the war in Europe seemed to be drawing to a close, the British Royal Air Force was about to unleash a weapon that would challenge all conventional notions of destructive power. While German generals hid in bunkers they believed to be impenetrable, and the Reich's engineers boasted of their reinforced concrete structures up to 15 feet thick, a single British bomb was being prepared to turn these fortresses into smoking ruins. What few knew was that this weapon didn't rely solely on explosives. Its true strength lay in a physical principle as simple as it was devastating: the pure kinetic energy of 22,000 pounds of steel falling from the sky. The Grand Slam was not just a bigger bomb. It was a revolution in the art of destruction that would render decades of German defensive engineering completely obsolete. When the first reports reached Axis commanders about impossible-to-destroy structures being pulverized by a single bomb, many simply refused to believe it. After all, how could a nation that had been bombed for years develop something that surpassed in destructive power everything that had come before? The story of the Grand Slam began not in conventional military laboratories, but in the brilliant mind of Barnes-Wallis, the same engineer who had created the famous bouncing bombs used in the attacks on German dams. In 1943, while observing the limited results of conventional bombing against fortified targets, Wallis came to a disturbing conclusion. No matter how many 500 or 1,000-pound bombs were dropped, the enemy's most critical installations remained intact. German submarine pens, with their monstrously thick concrete roofs, mocked Allied efforts. Vital railway bridges remained operational after attacks that cost dozens of aircraft and hundreds of lives. Wallis realized that the problem wasn't the quantity of explosives, but the fundamental physics of how they were delivered. A bomb that exploded on the surface wasted most of its energy in the air. But what if a bomb could penetrate deep into the ground before detonating? What if it could use the earth itself as a compression chamber, turning the terrain into a seismic hammer capable of destroying structures through subterranean shockwaves? This wasn't just a new bomb, it was a new philosophy of destruction. The development of the Grand Slam faced initial skepticism that bordered on ridicule. When Wallis presented his calculations for a 22,000-pound bomb, many officers openly laughed. "Impossible," they declared. "No plane can carry such weight." But Wallis had done his homework. He knew that the Avro Lancaster, with specific modifications, could be adapted for this extraordinary mission. The challenge wasn't just the weight, it was the aerodynamics. A 25-foot-long bomb would completely alter the aircraft's center of gravity. Standard bomb bays would have to be removed, and the bomb would be carried semi-externally, creating a distinctive silhouette that would make the Lancaster look like a prehistoric animal carrying a gigantic egg. Initial tests were terrifying. Pilots reported that the aircraft behaved completely differently with the Grand Slam on board. Takeoff required longer runways, cruising speed decreased significantly, and maneuverability was severely compromised. But when the first penetration tests were conducted on British test ranges, the results silenced all skeptics. The bomb penetrated 100 feet into the ground before exploding, creating craters that looked as if they had been caused by meteors. The first Lancaster BI Special, modified to carry the Grand Slam, was an impressive and frightening sight. Squadron 617, the famous dambusters, were chosen for this mission due to their experience with unconventional weapons. When the pilots first saw their modified Lancasters, many fell silent. The aircraft seemed to have been transformed into something out of an engineering nightmare. The bomb bay had been completely removed, and the Grand Slam hung semi-externally, its black aerodynamic shape contrasting dramatically with the bomber's camouflaged fuselage. The additional weight required the Lancasters to operate with reduced fuel tanks, limiting their operational range. This meant that targets would have to be relatively close to British bases, or that aerial refueling missions would have to be organized, an extremely risky operation over enemy territory. The pilots of 617 Squadron quickly discovered that flying with a Grand Slam was like flying a completely different aircraft. Takeoff required special techniques, with a more gradual rotation and the use of the entire runway length. Once airborne, the aircraft responded slowly to commands, and any evasive maneuver became practically impossible. The Grand Slam's first operational mission was carefully planned to maximize both physical and psychological impact. The chosen target was the Bielefeld railway viaduct in Germany, a crucial structure for transporting German supplies on the Western Front. On March 14, 1945, Squadron Leader C.C. Calder took off from Woodhall Spa in his modified Lancaster, carrying the first Grand Slam to be used in combat. The mission was risky not only due to the bomb's weight, but because the Lancaster would have to fly at a relatively low altitude to ensure maximum accuracy. German anti-aircraft defense systems were still active in the region, and a Lancaster loaded with a Grand Slam was a tempting and vulnerable target. As Calder approached the target, he knew he had only one chance. There was no possibility of a second pass, fuel was limited, and the aircraft was too vulnerable for prolonged maneuvers over enemy territory. The bomb was released from 12,000 feet, and Calder immediately initiated a sharp turn to move away from the impact area. What happened in the next few seconds would forever change German perceptions of the invulnerability of their fortified structures. The impact of the first Grand Slam on the Bielefeld viaduct exceeded all expectations. The bomb penetrated deep into the ground near the base of the structure before exploding, creating an artificial earthquake that destroyed over 400 feet of the viaduct. But what truly shocked German observers was not just the physical destruction. It was the nature of the destruction. Conventional bombs would have created surface craters and possibly damaged some sections of the viaduct. The Grand Slam literally made the earth shake, transmitting destructive energy through the solid ground and causing massive concrete and steel structures to disintegrate as if they were made of paper. German intelligence reports described the event as impossible and contrary to the laws of physics. German engineers who inspected the wreckage were perplexed by the pattern of destruction. There was no evidence of a direct explosion on the structure. Instead, it seemed as if the earth itself had rebelled against human construction. The subterranean shockwave had traveled through the rocky ground, amplifying its destructive force and causing structural failures at points hundreds of feet from the actual impact point. This was the moment when German military doctrine on defensive fortifications began to crumble. The psychological consequences of the Grand Slam on German forces were as devastating as its physical impact. Soldiers who had spent years building and trusting subterranean bunkers suddenly found themselves questioning the safety of their positions. German field reports captured after the war revealed a disturbing pattern, plummeting morale among troops responsible for defending fortified installations. Obergefreiter Hans Müller, captured after the bombing of a radar facility near Hamburg, described in interrogation, "We thought our bunkers were safe. They told us no bomb could reach us at 50 feet deep. Then that damned British bomb came, and the whole mountain shook. Men who were 200 yards away felt the ground move under their feet." Fear spread rapidly through German ranks. Soldiers began to avoid deep bunkers, preferring surface positions where they could at least see danger approaching. German commanders reported increasing difficulties in keeping troops in critical underground facilities. The Grand Slam had achieved something that thousands of conventional bombings had failed to do. It broke German confidence in their own defenses. The German response to the Grand Slam threat revealed the Reich's growing desperation in its final moments. Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, ordered an urgent review of all critical underground installations. German engineers worked frantically to develop countermeasures, but quickly discovered there was no simple solution. Reinforcing existing bunkers would require resources that Germany simply did not possess in March 1945. Building new, deeper bunkers would take months that the Reich did not have. The only viable option was to disperse critical installations, but this also presented insurmountable logistical problems. Captured German documents revealed desperate plans to build superbunkers over 200 feet deep, but these never materialized. Some German commanders even went so far as to suggest the complete abandonment of underground facilities in favor of mobile structures, but this would have meant abandoning years of investment in defensive infrastructure. General der Flieger Adolf Galland, in his post-war memoirs, admitted that the Grand Slam rendered our defensive doctrine obsolete overnight. The Luftwaffe, already severely weakened, lacked the resources to effectively intercept the modified Lancasters, especially considering they operated with Allied fighter escort. The strategic impact of the Grand Slam extended far beyond its direct physical targets. Between March and May 1945, only 41 Grand Slam bombs were dropped, but their psychological effect was disproportionate to their number. Each mission was carefully planned to hit high-value symbolic and strategic targets: critical railway viaducts, underground command bunkers, fortified fuel production facilities, and submarine bases. The Arnsberg viaduct, destroyed on March 19, cut a vital supply line for the German Army Group B. The Valentin synthetic fuel plant, hit in April, never operated again. But perhaps more important than the physical destruction was the effect on German morale. Soldiers and German civilians began to realize that there was no truly safe place. If underground bunkers 100 feet deep offered no protection, where could they hide? This perception of total vulnerability accelerated the collapse of German resistance in many sectors. Field commanders reported dramatic increases in desertions and surrenders, particularly among troops responsible for defending installations that could be Grand Slam targets. The weapon had achieved something that entire armies struggled to accomplish: breaking the will to resist. When the war in Europe ended in May 1945, the Grand Slam had fundamentally redefined the concepts of siege warfare and defensive fortification. Military engineers worldwide studied the effects of this revolutionary weapon, realizing that the era of traditional underground fortifications had come to an end. Barnes-Wallis's bomb proved that no matter how deep you dug or how thick your concrete walls were, the physics of deep penetration and subterranean explosion could overcome any static defense. The Grand Slam's legacy extended far beyond World War II. Concepts developed for this weapon influenced the design of deep penetration armaments throughout the Cold War and beyond. Modern bunkers are designed with shock absorption systems and modular structures specifically to resist Grand Slam-type attacks. But perhaps the most enduring legacy is psychological: the understanding that no fortification is truly impenetrable, and that technological innovation can render the most solid defensive doctrines obsolete. The Grand Slam was not just a bomb. It was a demonstration that creative engineering and applied physics could overcome any obstacle, no matter how formidable it seemed. In a world where absolute security is an illusion, the Grand Slam remains a reminder that true strength lies not in impenetrable walls, but in the ability to adapt, innovate, and overcome.